Greetings, brothers and sisters of the faith. Come to you today, and we're going to talk about the first part of Job, really chapters 1 through 3. Job is a decent sized book, and it certainly delves into a lot of important topics. But just starting right off, who is Job? Some say that he was an actual historical figure, others say that this is simply just a more or less like a dramatic play in a sense. Whatever the case may be, we have a scripture here, and it really does tell us an amazing story. One of triumph, one that's kind of riches to rags, but then rags to riches once again. And who was Job really? Like, he was a man who had prestige, he had possessions, he had a tremendous amount of wealth for his time, which some say the timeline was about 2,000 years before Christ. And it's really a question. The real question that's posed is, what's your foundation? And what's the quality of your foundation? Jesus talks a lot about this in the sense that, is your house built on solid rock, or is it built on merely sand? And is it just going to quickly be fleeting when a storm comes? And God certainly did allow a storm to be sent. Keyword allow. It's a good question of why God would ever allow something. We are in his image. Christ is in us now. And why does he still allow things to happen even today? And obviously, Job took place before Christ, but the question still stands. Why? Why test in the first place? And even in Garden of Eden, which was heaven, he allowed testing. He allowed Satan to come as a serpent and to test. So it really talks about the meaning of true faith. And who wrote the book? Not many people know. I'm reading here. It could have been Moses. It could have been Solomon. It could have been one of his friends, Elihu, or Elihu, however you pronounce the name. But it's a poetic book in the sense that it follows like this poetic narrative. It's different how you would normally read a book, and it's like as if he wrote the book himself, but from the third person point of view. And we're going to get more into that. Um, but the overarching theme is that he's a wealthy man. Evil happens to him not because of his own sin. His friends come to his aid and they accuse him of sinning. One even goes to say, as far as to say that this is a purification by God. And whether that's true or not, it's really about testing. And the thing is, you don't need to know why something bad happens to you. And the idea is that you don't need to know everything, which is the scary part for all of us. Um, and Job really did maintain his innocence throughout the book. But he learned to rely on God because the idea is, he did really well. He always praised God for his things. And if you read Proverbs, you do all these great things, and then all these great things will happen to you. It's like this motivational book. But I love how Job comes before Proverbs because I read Proverbs and it's not about lamentations. It's not about sorrows. It's not about a dramatic, terrible story, a sad story. It's about like as if like you had these motivational quotes and they were all just, aligned together and it just fluidly works. But when we talk about Job, he encounters a storm and really he learns to find his true bedrock. So just jumping right into it, chapter 1, he talks about how there was a man in Job in the land of Uz. He was blameless and upright. He feared God and he shunned evil. So he feared God, he had a respect for God, and he shunned evil. He had 10 children, he had thousands of sheep, he had a large number of servants. And after every single feast, he wanted his children to be purified just in case they actually did something wrong. And this actually became his habit. This was his custom. And here comes Satan, right? So before this, he's taking all of these precautions because he has built up this wealth and he's just so certain of doing the right things. It's almost as if he takes a legalistic approach. So outwardly, he's doing everything right. Inwardly, is his heart in the right place? Is it, is he expecting that good things are going to happen to him because he does good things? And and then guess who roams the earth? So from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it, here comes the antagonist. Here comes who they call the accuser. And that's a very interesting word because he's going to accuse Job of not being true to God. And his bet, in a sense, is that he's surely going to curse your face, your being God's face. But God allows these things to happen with a stipulation that meaning you can only have as wrong things happen or as evil things happen to you up to what God allows. It's kind of like the idea that everyone faces challenges, but nothing what we can't handle. Um, and all these bad things happen to him. His donkeys are taken away from him. Um, the heavens come down, they burn up the sheep and the servants. They come, they take down his camels. Um, and then finally, it all culminates into his house falling and his children dying. But why would God ever cause something like this? Why would God ever hurt a child? Why would he ever allow a child to be hurt? And then surely God wasn't the one actually hurting them, Satan was. But he allowed it. God didn't have to allow it. And, it's a really interesting point to ponder because the suffering wasn't a result of Job's sin against God. There was nothing to say before this that he didn't stop being upright. So he was blameless, just like Noah in his time. So, instead of Noah, going on the boat, he had all these things happen to him. He didn't get to take his family with him, and his family died a terrible death. And his whole idea, the whole bet is he going to curse God because of this? So as we continue reading, after the house collapses and they all die, he immediately goes into mourning. He shaves his head, he tears off his robe, he falls to the ground in worship. Immediately, he does what outwardly seems to be the right thing to do. He falls to worship. And the question that we can't really answer is why. Right? Why did he actually do it? Did he do this because he felt the absolute need to? Did he do this to please God so somehow it could all be reversed? Why did he do it? Did he really worship God in that time? Because it's awfully a weird time to worship, right? When something terrible has just happened to you. It's not by anyone's extent the knee-jerk reaction. And frankly, when Jesus was up on the cross, he suffered and then he cried out, God, why do you forsake me? Even then, the Son of Man, this is God's one and only Son, who he allowed to be crucified, to die, uh, actually called out and asked, why is this bad stuff happening to me? And he later goes to say, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Certainly, once again, not a reaction one would expect. And the question is, why did he want the name of the Lord to be praised? So Satan continues to tempt after being turned down. He says, skin for skin, strike his flesh and bones, and surely he will curse. But then God says, but spare his life. Once again, God only allows you to endure what you can handle. So he's going to spare his life, and then immediately, broken pottery, and he scrapes himself. But then, interesting enough, his wife comes and he says, curse God and die. It's interesting how we see this trope throughout the Bible of a woman being coerced by Satan to say an evil thing, and then to kind of coerce her husband to follow suit, that just give up and just die. But he doesn't. He says, shall we accept good from God and not trouble? You're talking foolish. And he realizes kind of the source of where this is coming from in the suffering. And he is on the surface accepting of what is happening outwardly. Later, his three friends come, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, and they come to sympathize with him 7 days and 7 nights. Moving into chapter 3, this is when Job starts to actually speak. And then the first thing he speaks is that he curses the day of his birth. He actually wants death. He never actually wants to be even alive in the first place because he never wanted to experience this. So all the good that he had experienced up to this point was great. But then when something terrible happened, he wishes it never happened at all. It's interesting because he lived his whole life, however long he must have lived up to this point, in probably sheer bliss, filled with wealth. And then a single day's event causes him to wish he never was born. So he reflects and he thinks that, shut the doors of the womb on me to hide the trouble from my eyes. And he just continues to go on to say in 24 through 26 of chapter 3, for sighing has become my daily food, my groans pour out like water. What I feared has come upon me, what I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, no quietness, I have no rest, but only turmoil. He actually complains. He actually begins to really shout out and give real complaint. And obviously, complaint is a common theme that happens throughout the Old Testament and even into the New Testament. And obviously, in modern day, the idea that these bad things are happening to me, they shouldn't be happening to me. It's just time to complain. And this isn't to say that complaining is, certainly it's not the upright thing to do, but is it never supposed to happen? It's debatable because God wants you to show your actual emotions. It doesn't say immediately after that, and then Job sinned, and then Satan won the bet. It doesn't say that at all. That's not what proceeds. What proceeds is more of the story. It further unravels as he starts to unravel. We're going to leave it off there for today, but this poses a lot of interesting questions. It sets the scene very dramatically, and it touches on really deep emotions. And we can talk about today, why would God ever allow a child to have cancer? Why would a child ever suffer something traumatic, something terrible? Why would a child ever suffer death? And that continues to happen. And obviously, you can make the case for any number of crimes committed on someone, any number of sin committed on someone. Why did God allow this to happen in the first place? And God he's not going to give you the answer. And he doesn't give Job the answer outright. And it wasn't necessarily because you sinned. It doesn't mean that the child sinned in any of these cases. But God did allow the testing to occur. And partly it is to see where your heart's at. Where is your true foundation at? Are you going to continue to act outwardly stable and upright? And then it's all a facade. And then internally, you crumble. And then finally, you're just too weak and you give up. We're supposed to run the race of endurance. And it's a really powerful book to give us motivation because it shows us a man who lost everything in probably one of the worst ways possible, and having everyone turn on him, accusing him, just like the accuser Satan wanted. But he doesn't submit. He doesn't surrender. So hope you enjoyed this. Feel free to share your thoughts on this. This is just going to be the first part of Job. Obviously, it's a good sized book, so love to hear your thoughts. Thanks.